talk about physics. So, like many people who are not physicists, I first became familiar with phrases like the grand unified theory and the unified field theory and the complete unified theory by reading many years ago the bestseller by Stephen Hawking. It was called A Brief History of Time. Any of y'all read that? Now, I realize that we actually have one or two physicists in our congregation, if I'm not mistaken, and many other smarty pants among us. So believe me when I tell you, I will probably get something wrong today. So feel free to use your worship bulletin as a scorecard and let me know how I did. If you've not read A Brief History of Time, it is a wonderful and humorous book written for those of us of a more average intelligence. In it, Stephen Hawking helpfully translates into everyday language the mind-bending world of physics and theoretical cosmology. He summarizes the two major competing theories that are used to describe the universe: the theory of general relativity and the theory of quantum mechanics. Then he talks about the holy grail of theoretical physics, the search for a unifying theory, one that, as the name suggests, would bring together general relativity and quantum mechanics. That theory, if someone is ever smart enough to come up with it, is popularly known as the theory of everything. Now, when he first wrote A Brief History of Time, Stephen Hawking believed that there is indeed somewhere out there, most likely, a unified theory of everything. As the name suggests, it would explain and it would link together everything on Earth, everything out in space, the whole shebang, how the universe was put together and how it works. Later in life, he was not so sure that such a unifying theory could ever be formulated, but he suggests, though, that by continuing to explore how we came to be here, we might also begin to understand why we came to be here. Now, whenever we start with how, and then we begin asking why questions, a shift is taking place. However, some might say it's not a shift at all, but we're dealing with two distinct things. That there is a firm line of demarcation between the study of how and the study of why. On one side of that line, the how side, is the realm of hard scientific fact. For example, the boiling point of water at sea level is 100 degrees Celsius. It's also about theories that are based on observations of material reality, theories that are true, at least until someone comes along to prove them wrong. That's how the scientific method works. Theory of natural selection, for instance, that is in the realm of how, in that case, how evolution occurs. And then on the other side of that hard line is the realm of why. Why is about ideas, beliefs, doctrines, the transcendent, the paranormal, the mystical. It is not about the objective study of material physical reality. No, it is about the metaphysical. So we can understand that people who are involved in the how of things might not always see any connection to the why of things. Or they're just not interested in why. Why should they care about why? Knowing how is good enough. Conversely, people in the why camp may not have much of an interest in how. The assumption that how and why do not mix, well, it's really all around us. There's the reality of how things work, but why the physical world works in the first place, or the ultimate meaning of that work, or the ethics around the impact of how anything works, is not always fully considered. Henry Ford mass-produced millions of cars, but did he consider the outcome of freeways and suburbs and burning so much fossil fuel? And beyond the goal of making a lot of money, did he ever consider why humans needed their own personal mechanized form of transportation? If he did, we don't know. We don't often think about the distinction between how and why, but that distinction is often our default way of seeing the world, really. It's built into our education system, our economy, and how we even value things. For instance, you can usually get a good high paying job with a how kind of college degree, something like engineering. But if you get a why kind of degree, like philosophy, you may end up being a barista at a coffee shop. Now, there's nothing at all wrong with being a barista, but the difference in pay between what a philosopher slash barista earns and what an engineer earns tells us a lot about what we value. Because when it comes down to it, we would rather have a bridge that will not collapse a lot more than we'd really like a great vanilla latte created by a stoic. It might have even sounded a little funny that I began today by saying, let's talk about physics. Because how could someone like me, trained in theology is definitely on the why side of things, how on earth would I ever be qualified to talk about physics? Where do I get off talking about such a very how topic? I should stay in my lane. Well, the thing is, no less than Stephen Hawking and other scientists, like Carl Sagan, seemed to agree that it can be very helpful and a lot more holistic to understand how and why, not as if they exist on opposite sides of a hard line and never the twain shall meet, but to imagine that how can lead to why, and maybe even vice versa. If a theory of everything in physics is ever devised, explaining the how of all things, the connected nature of the physical nature, it seems reasonable to me that a theory of everything could also exist to explain why we exist. What is the reason we're here? Why were we created or evolved? Plenty of theologians and philosophers have tried to answer that question, but usually they get bogged down in one school of thought or they're aligned with one belief system. And belief systems, we know, have complex origins. Any religion is the product of a particular time in history in a certain place and a unique culture. That culture's customs and worldview. It's sort of like those physicists who are either proponents of quantum mechanics or proponents of general relativity. Both of those theories about the physical universe have their strong points, and they both have their ardent believers, but neither theory completely explains everything. Now, many theologians would say that their belief system does explain everything, that Christianity or Buddhism or Islam can each be the standalone complete package for understanding the meaning of life and why we're here at all. But I wonder, just taking Christianity as an example, I came across an article recently that estimated that there are over 200 Christian denominations in the United States alone, and a whopping 45,000 unique Christian movements or denominations globally. 45,000. So, out of those, which version of Christianity has the one true authoritative set of beliefs and doctrines? Which one has the right answer to why? Ours, of course. And that's just Christians. If you add in the estimated 10,000 other religions around the world, many of which are also subdivided into numerous factions, that adds up to a lot of different theories floating around about the meaning of life and why we're here. So I wonder if any of us can ever say with a straight face that our group's particular way of defining why is the one and only right way. Maybe it would be better to say with all humility that we only know what we know. We only know what we have been exposed to, what we've been taught, and what we've experienced. And we believe it to be the truth, and that truth works for us, but we're not so presumptuous to claim we possess all truth. Our thinking is not so absolute to believe that we've been exposed to or taught or that we've experienced every possible way of thinking about the nature of God. I think that's fair enough. And after all, the Apostle Paul said essentially the same thing in 1 Corinthians when he wrote, I know only in part, even as I am fully known. So if that attitude was good enough for good old Paul, it works for me too. At the same time, with all the varieties of beliefs and doctrines found in Christianity and in other faiths, and with all the various non-religious philosophies that are out there that people might adhere to, that presents us with a huge buffet table, a cafeteria of ideas to choose from. Some ideas that might go well together on our plate, good pairing there, and some that might need to stand alone. With that much variety, could there be a grand unifying theory of everything, one big platter for asking and answering why? Something that would begin to explain the reason we even exist for everyone, no matter your religious beliefs, if any. The idea that there's something or someone who brings together everything and everyone in an interconnected web of existence. Even though the Bible obviously provides a Jewish and a Christian perspective on this, it does give us several options, I think, for thinking that a theory of everything in fact exists. A good example is found in the passage that we heard this morning from the Gospel of Mark. It's a familiar story. Jesus is with his disciples in front of the temple in Jerusalem. Around the temple courtyard, you have to picture this enormous complex, a big area about the size of several football fields together. And around the yard, in the area called the treasury, there were large brass collection bowls placed here and there. The bowls were shaped a lot like funnels, so they resembled a bathroom sink, freestanding, with a hole at the bottom that emptied into a collection bucket hidden beneath ground level. Kind of ingenious if you think about it. When you dropped a coin into the brass bowl, it made a very loud racket that everyone could hear and rolled around and around until it deposited itself. And there was no subtlety or privacy about making an offering. It was a very public act. So Jesus and his disciples could not help noticing a few very wealthy, well-dressed men making large donations because of the sound of all their clattering coins dropping and rolling in. And Jesus had just made a point about the hypocrisy and self-righteous behavior of many of the upper-class people, like the scribes, some of whom lorded it over others and made ostentatious displays of their own wealth, some of whom even cheated people out of their estates. Scribes were necessary if you wanted to make a legal transaction, and widows especially could be preyed upon by unscrupulous scribes. Happened enough that Jesus mentioned it many times. In contrast to these boorish show-offs making loud offerings, Jesus points out a poor widow nearby making an offering of one or two cheap copper coins, and he surmises that her modest gift represents everything that she has, when clearly the wealthy men had just given a tiny fraction of their wealth, an amount they would likely never miss anyway. Seems like a straightforward story about the purity of heart and faith and self-sacrifice of this poor woman compared to the self-righteous, hey, look at me behavior of the wealthy guys. Pure of heart, self-sacrifice equals good. Self-righteous behavior equals bad. That's usually our takeaway from this. And on one level, it is about that. There's a lot more to it. One old misreading of this story is that we are expected to give all we have to the church. Just like that poor woman did. I've heard that sermon before. I would not suggest doing that, because the point Jesus is making is not about the amount of the giving, but about the proportion. And just as important as the proportion is the way in which the money is given. Giving anything of yourself says something. It means that you understand maybe the most basic thing about being a human being. That is, no person is an island. We live in connection with, and we live in a relationship to other people. We don't give to inanimate objects. We give to benefit other people directly or to support people who are working for causes that we believe in. And very often that cause is one that benefits other people. We give because we can see beyond ourselves to something greater than ourselves for the sake of others. And if we step back and think about it, it's huge that we almost intuitively grasp how important, how critical that is. From an evolutionary behavioral standpoint, we learn as toddlers that we all need to play in the same sandbox and to help each other and share our toys or someone's going to suffer. It's the belief and the perspective that all of us are part of the human family and that what I do has an impact, good or bad, on the whole. That's why we give. The wealthy men of the story knew all of that. They were not raised in some kind of social isolation chamber. And they were certainly capable of giving a lot more, but their vision of how connected that they were to others, their vision was limited. In contrast, the poor woman's vision was unlimited. She gave everything. To add insult to their own self-inflicted injury of not grasping the importance of their connectedness, it was the habit of the wealthy men to make a big show of their giving. The irony that they missed was how that silly they only highlighted their limited vision and their complete ignorance of the big picture. But the poor woman, by giving quietly, demonstrated her clear-eyed understanding that she belonged to something far greater than herself. And that awareness, that way of being in the world, Jesus says, is everything. And it points to directly, it points to why. Why we are here in the first place. The reason. And it points directly to the God who created us to live into that reason, the why of our existence. My take on that, my own theory of everything, it's to seek and find the truth that regardless of religious belief or culture or ethnicity or language or status, we belong to each other and we are dependent on each other. We are responsible for each other and we are knit together with each other. No matter the divisions we see manifested in our world, no matter the voices who tell us that we must be suspicious of strangers and even our neighbors, no matter those who play on fears to attain power, we can still live in a community of loving and serving and living into a sacred, transcendent reality where the better angels of our nature are called upon to act, where God, however we may know and worship God, is found, in how we regard each other and treat each other and help each other and serve each other as the precious, beloved creations we are. There's a name for how we do that. It is called love, God's love. And that is the how, and that is the why, and that is everything.